So during his State of the Nation address, President Ramaphosa announced the establishment of a national water crisis committee that he would chair himself. And this comes on the back of the country's ongoing water challenges, ranging from shortages to degenerate infrastructure. Now, many communities across South Africa have experienced water cuttages for days and weeks. And the disruptions have even impacted essential services such as schools and clinics, and have also compromised health and hygiene. And in this week's Joburg We Love This Place newsletter, Daily Maverick Associate Editor Ferrial Adam published letters from residents across the city and the impact on schools. One headmaster, for instance, mentioned how hygiene is compromised for children at school when there's no water available. Let's take a look at the impact of this ongoing water challenge we have on essential services and communities, and what work will need to be done to resolve the crisis. We're joined by WaterCan Executive Manager Ferrial Adam, Senior Manager at the Water Research Commission, Bahgwan, and community activist Suraya Bibi Khan. Good morning to all of you. Thank you so much for your time. Now,
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
Let me start with you, Adam. Let's start with the big picture. What exactly are we witnessing right now? Is this a limited strike, a regime change or operation? Are we watching an opening of a chapter of a full-scale crisis?
So good morning to you and to your viewers. I think, yes, we do have a full-scale crisis, and I do think it's not only limited to Johannesburg. I think it's countrywide. I think we're having challenges across the country in terms of water and sanitation infrastructure. And, Joburg's being hit now, and you've mentioned about closing schools, etc. But this is something that people have been living for now a number of years in many parts of South Africa, where schools have to close, where young girls are not going to school because there isn't adequate water and sanitation at the schools, where elderly are using their grants to pay for water. So I think that definitely we're having a national crisis, and it's due to aging and old infrastructure where not enough maintenance has been done for over a decade.
Now, Mr. Bahgwan, your research sits at the intersection of water quality and human health. And we know that waterborne diseases, for instance, like diarrhea, are primarily transmitted in schools. So how close are we, scientifically speaking, to a public health emergency in our most underserved communities?
Yeah, so, there's two parts to the issue of public health and vulnerability. One is the quality of water and the quantity of water. So when you don't have adequate quantities of water, it has impact on, physical health as well as sanitation. And, when you don't have good sanitation, that's the pathway for transmission of these diseases, especially when you don't have any hygienic practices. With the drinking water, one element we're fortunate is that, we can get access to bottled water, etc., and other sources to alleviate it for some time. But on the if it's a long period of issues we're having, that starts leading to that public health vulnerability. And it's a big issue and a big concern if the situation persists. We're already sitting in a situation where we have high prevalence of diarrheal diseases in many of our communities, especially the low-income communities, and these persistent outages and shortages just adds more pressure and can lead to greater mortality and those kind of aspects.
Yeah, let's expand on that. Suraya, from a community perspective, what does a water outage really look like for families on the ground?
Good morning to everyone. I think all of it has been covered by Ferrial Adam. So my point that I want to come in is in relation to our responsibility. We have a Bill of Rights, but Bill of Rights doesn't ensure that we do responsible with regard to our water. We have forgotten what was before 1995, 94. The Dwarf Act that was passed in 1995, one of the first bills that was passed was the Dwarf Act with Dr. Kader, now I can't remember his full name. But we need to understand where it comes from. What does it mean for us to understand what the situation is with regard to water? And I've witnessed, I've been in another country where I've seen how water availability is weaponized. And I'm very mindful of the fact that, yes, we talk, and I'm grateful, yes, we can get bottled water. It's clean, it's everything else. But part of that is also where we stand in relation to internationally what bottled water means for the world. And how I went to Bethlehem. I went to Bethlehem and the doctor told me, he said to me, that dam was our reservoir. And because one child died in that dam, they drained the entire dam, which is historical. The dam was built at the time of Suleiman. So they drained the whole water. And what is water if it is not weaponized? So yes, I understand where the other speakers are coming from. But for me, yes, I'm grassroots, but I'm coming from the old a group of activists that were involved those days, and we had to learn a lot about what politics is beyond our borders and what the world is in relation to that. I thank you.
Now, Dr. Adam, we often hear that South Africa is water scarce, but are we truly short of water or short of governance and maintenance?
So I think it's both, right? I mean, I think if you look at us geographically, we are in a very water scarce region. So that means that for us, we get half the average rainfall that you would find globally. And so we need to be more mindful. We need to be able to use our water and actually protect our water resources much better than we are doing right now. And so that links directly to governance, because there isn't that realization, or that hasn't filtered through, that we are a water scarce region and that we need to protect our water resources, that we're seeing that poor governance has led to completely destroying our water resources. And we can't only think of water that's coming out of our tap, because if we are polluting our rivers and our streams and our wetlands, it's going to choke the entire environmental kind of aspects of the water. So, for example, if I say to you that 60% of our river ecosystems, because of pollution, are threatened. That means you are killing off the animals, you're killing off the plants, you're killing off the basic life of water. And that gives us dead water that nobody can really use. So that for me it's both. It's the governance as well as the fact that we're in a very water scarce country, and the governance needs to make sure that we understand that across the country.
All right. Now, are we investing enough in water reuse, in recycling, and alternative supply systems? Suraya?
Absolutely not.
Yes.
Oops, sorry.
No, it's okay. You can continue.
I was going to say absolutely not. I mean, I think that the fact we still have developments of housing settlements and housing estates where we're flushing clean drinking water down the toilet. In this day and age, that should be looked at as criminal, because it's a complete wastage. We have to start recycling. We have to use our grey water better, because we need to have drinking water, and it's not good enough to say that there's bottled water and there's water tankers. Because if you look at people on the ground, firstly, people can't afford to all buy bottled water. And the water tanker, we know that there's a water tanker mafia that's almost moving in to take over our water supply.
Now, Jay, groundwater and borehole expansion is being presented as part of the solution, but how do we ensure that what communities are drilling into is actually safe to drink?
Yeah, look, it's always, in this modern civilization, important, to test groundwater before use. I mean, especially in areas where you have big industry and very dense settlements. So the point is that, we're not blessed in South Africa with a lot of groundwater. We have a very few amount of strategic aquifers that give us that potential. But we're not blessed that we drop boreholes and we can get lots of groundwater, in South Africa. So, we need to just highlight that it can be a source, especially in remote areas that depend largely on it. But in some of the very dense metro areas, etc., groundwater is not available in large abundance because there's no significant aquifers in those areas. Of course, groundwater is also in urban areas, contributed by leakages, and other factors, etc., from the surface. So you always need to do very good, geohydrological modeling, etc., to really understand. Most of our waters are tapped through fractures in the rock, etc. And knowing and understanding where those are and the flow of this water is very, very key to ensure that you use it sustainably.
Okay. And now in closing, before we close the conversation, Suraya, if I may just end with you as a community activist and member of EWADI, which is the Environmental Work Active Development Initiative, what role does EWADI play in mobilizing communities around environmental justice?
Thank you, Masija. But the point is we come from SAWID, and SAWID is a dialogue platform. So with EWADI, we try to dialogue, to explain and to engage with women, because environment is so important. Ferrial just spoke about it. When we don't see it to the point of where we are doing, what we're doing with grey water, what we are doing with plastics and the cleaning of our areas. If we don't keep our areas clean, it's not just cleaning the environment for the children not to be what's his name with substance abuse, but it's also the children and everyone to understand our responsibility to keep our country clean, because that is part of our cleanliness for clean water. I hope that makes sense. I thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of you for your time.